Imagine a man who never wrote a single word, yet he changed the way every human being on this planet thinks. He had no money, no shoes, and no official power. Yet the most powerful empire on earth was so terrified of him that they sentenced him to death. They didn't kill him because he committed a crime. They killed him because he asked a question that peeled back the skin of society and exposed the rotting bones beneath. His name was Socrates, but to the elites of Athens, he was something else, a gadfly, a corrupter, a virus. Today, we are stepping into the dusty, blood-soaked streets of ancient Greece to find out how a stonecutter's son became the most dangerous mind in history. This isn't a story about philosophy. It's a story about a war for the human soul. Before the trials and the poison, there was the soldier. To understand the mind of Socrates, you have to understand his body. In the freezing winters of the Peloponnesian War, while other soldiers were wrapping themselves in fur and shivering in their boots, Socrates walked barefoot on the ice. He wore the same thin cloak in the blizzard that he wore in the summer heat. He was a hoplite, a heavy infantryman. He stood in the front lines with a massive shield and a spear, staring into the eyes of men who wanted to gut him. But it was during the siege of Potidaea that something truly strange happened. One morning at dawn, Socrates stopped in his tracks. He stood motionless. He didn't eat, he didn't drink, he didn't speak. He just stared. The other soldiers watched him, laughing at first, then whispering in fear. The sun went down and he was still there. The moon rose and he hadn't moved a muscle. He stood there for 24 hours, a statue of flesh and bone, locked in a mental battle no one else could see. What did he see in that silence? What realization did he reach that made him immune to the physical world? When he returned to Athens, he was no longer a soldier of the state. He was a soldier of the truth. Athens at this time was the center of the world. It was a place of golden statues, massive temples, and arrogant men. The city was filled with sophists, teachers who charged a fortune to teach people how to win arguments regardless of the truth. They taught people how to make the wrong look right. It was the birth of PR, of spin, of political manipulation. And then there was the oracle. Socrates' friend Chaerephon went to the temple of Apollo at Delphi. He asked the high priestess, "Is there anyone wiser than Socrates?" The oracle's answer sent a shockwave through the Mediterranean. No, no one is wiser. When Socrates heard this, he didn't feel pride. He felt a cold, sharp dread. He knew nothing. He knew he was ignorant, so he decided to prove the god wrong. He began a hunt. He went to the most famous politicians in Athens. These were men who gave 3-hour speeches about justice and virtue. He walked up to them in the crowded marketplace and asked a simple, innocent question. What is courage? Or what is piety? At first, the politicians would smile. They would give a beautiful, poetic answer. And then Socrates would pull a single thread. But if that is true, he would ask, then wouldn't this also be true? Within minutes, the great politician would be stuttering. His logic would collapse. He would realize in front of his own citizens that he didn't actually know what he was talking about. Socrates wasn't just arguing, he was performing an autopsy on their minds while they were still alive. Imagine the tension. Imagine being a powerful senator and having this barefoot, ugly man with bulging eyes and a tattered robe humiliate you in public just by asking questions. Socrates was dismantling the ego of the ruling class. He was showing the people that their leaders were hollow. He was a mirror, and the city of Athens hated what they saw when they looked into it. But it wasn't just the politicians. The youth of Athens, the sons of the wealthy, the future leaders, started following him. They loved watching the old guard get torn apart by logic. They started imitating him. They started questioning their fathers, their traditions, and their gods. To the establishment, Socrates wasn't a teacher. He was a cult leader. He was a man who was sharpening the minds of the next generation like blades, and those blades were pointed directly at the heart of the state. The atmosphere in Athens began to sour. The city had lost a devastating war to Sparta. The economy was in ruins. The democracy had been overthrown and then restored, leaving everyone paranoid and bloodthirsty. People were looking for someone to blame for their bad luck. They needed a scapegoat. They needed to silence the voice that kept reminding them of their own failures. In the shadows, 3 men began to plot: Anytus, a powerful politician; Meletus, an obscure poet; and Lycon, a professional orator. They didn't want a debate. They wanted a disappearance. They drafted a document that would change the course of Western history, an indictment that carried a single, terrifying penalty. As the sun rose on a spring morning in 399 BC, a notice was posted in the heart of the city. Socrates, the son of Sophronicus, was being summoned to court. The charges: refusing to recognize the gods of the state, introducing new divinities, and most importantly, corrupting the youth of Athens. The trap was set. The hunters were ready. But what they didn't realize was that Socrates had been waiting for this moment his entire life. He wasn't the prey. He was the architect of his own destruction. And as he walked towards the courthouse, he wasn't thinking about how to save his life. He was thinking about how to end it in a way that would make him live forever.
The air on the hill of the Areopagus was thick with the scent of sweat and anticipation. 501 jurors, ordinary citizens of Athens, sat on stone benches, their faces hardened by war and economic ruin. In the center stood a man who looked like anything but a hero. Socrates was 70 years old, his hair a mess of white, his feet bare, his belly protruding. But when he looked at the crowd, his eyes didn't show fear. They showed a piercing, almost predatory intelligence. This wasn't a modern courtroom with lawyers and evidence. This was a theater of death. In ancient Athens, the accuser and the accused spoke for themselves. There was a water clock, a clepsydra, dripping steadily, timing every word. If you ran out of water, you ran out of time. Meletus, the young poet, stood up first. His voice was high and nervous. He laid out the charges. Socrates was a dangerous atheist who made the weaker argument the stronger. He was poisoning the minds of the city's sons, turning them against their families. He was a cancer in the body of the democracy. The jurors nodded. They remembered their sons coming home and questioning the very foundations of their lives. They wanted blood. Then Socrates stepped forward. The crowd went silent. This was the moment everyone had waited for. Would he beg? Would he bring his weeping wife and 3 young sons into the court to garner sympathy, as was the custom? He did the opposite. "Men of Athens," he began, his voice calm and resonant, "I am not here to defend myself for my own sake. I am here to defend myself for yours." Imagine the shock. He wasn't pleading for his life. He was lecturing his judges. He told them the story of the oracle at Delphi. He explained that his entire life had been a divine mission to find a man wiser than himself, and in doing so, he had exposed the ignorance of the city. He looked directly at Anytus and Meletus and systematically dismantled their logic in front of the entire assembly. He made the men who were trying to kill him look like fools. "If you kill me," Socrates warned, "you will not easily find another like me." He compared himself to a gadfly, a persistent, stinging fly, and Athens to a large, noble, but sluggish horse. The horse needed the fly to keep it awake, to keep it moving, to keep it from falling into a terminal sleep of moral decay. "I am the gift of God to this city," he declared. The jurors began to murmur. The arrogance was staggering. To them, he wasn't a gift, he was an insult. The first vote was taken. The jurors walked up to 2 urns and dropped in their bronze discs. When the shards were counted, the result was surprisingly close. 280 voted for guilty, 221 for innocent. A shift of only 30 votes would have set him free. Under Athenian law, after a guilty verdict, the accuser proposed a penalty and the defendant proposed a counter-penalty. Miletus, of course, proposed death. Now it was Socrates' turn. All he had to do was propose exile. He could have walked away, moved to a different city, and lived a long life. The jury wanted him gone, not necessarily dead. But Socrates refused to play the game. "What do I deserve for being a benefactor to the city?" he asked the jury. "I'll tell you what I deserve. I deserve to be maintained at the public expense in the Prytaneum like an Olympic champion." The courtroom erupted. The Prytaneum was the hall where Athens honored its greatest heroes with free meals for life. Socrates wasn't just refusing to apologize, he was demanding the highest honor the city could bestow. It was a calculated act of defiance. He was forcing the jury to make a choice, either admit he was right or become murderers of the truth. Finally, under pressure from his friends, he offered a measly 30 minas of money. His friends, like Plato, had scrambled to put together, but the damage was done. The jury felt mocked. They felt humiliated. The second vote was called. This time, the margin wasn't close. More people voted to kill him than had originally voted him guilty. The sentence was death by hemlock. As the guards moved in to take him to the ship prison, Socrates stood tall. He looked at the men who had just sentenced him to die and said something that still echoes through history. "The hour of departure has arrived, and we go our separate ways. I to die, and you to live. Which is better? Only God knows." He walked out of the sunlight and into the shadows of the prison. He had 30 days left to live. And in those 30 days, he would pull off the greatest escape in history, not by leaving his cell, but by staying in it.
The iron doors of the state prison slammed shut, but for Socrates, the cell wasn't a cage, it was a final classroom. For 30 days, a religious taboo delayed his execution. The city was waiting for a sacred ship to return from Delos. While Athens waited for the ship, the world's most famous prisoner sat in chains, surrounded by his wealthiest and most influential friends. They had everything ready. They had bribed the jailers. They had a getaway carriage waiting at the city gates. A ship was docked, ready to whisk him away to Thessaly, where he would be safe, wealthy, and free to teach. His oldest friend, Crito, stood in the dim light of the cell, pleading with him. "Socrates, if you die, people will think we were too stingy to save you. Think of your children. Don't let your enemies win." But Socrates looked at his friend with a hauntingly calm smile. This is where the suspense reaches its peak. He wasn't afraid of death. He was afraid of being a hypocrite. "Crito," he asked, "if I have lived my whole life obeying the laws of Athens, how can I turn into a runaway slave the moment those laws don't go my way? If I break the law now to save my skin, I am telling the world that my philosophy was a lie. I am not running." He chose to stay. He chose the cup. He chose to turn his death into a masterpiece. Finally, the day arrived. The sacred ship had returned. The sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long golden shadows across the stone floor. The jailer, a man who had grown to love Socrates during those 30 days, entered the room with tears streaming down his face. He wasn't bringing dinner. He was bringing a small clay cup filled with the juice of the hemlock plant. The room was filled with the greatest minds of the age. Plato, who was reportedly ill but recorded the scene, Phaedo and Apollodorus. They were sobbing. The atmosphere was heavy with the realization that they were watching the end of an era. Socrates took the cup. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look for a way out. He asked the jailer for instructions. "You must drink it, then walk around until your legs feel heavy, then lie down, and the poison will do the rest." Socrates raised the cup. He offered a small prayer to the gods for a prosperous journey from this world to the next, and then, in one smooth motion, he drank it all. Apollodorus let out a loud, piercing wail. The others broke down, but Socrates, the man whose heart was beginning to fail, rebuked them. "What is this strange outcry? I sent the women away mainly to avoid such a scene. I have heard that a man should die in peace. Be quiet then, and have patience." He began to walk. The poison, a powerful neurotoxin, was starting its work. First, the feet go cold. Then the numbness crawls up the calves, then the thighs. As his legs gave way, he lay down on his back and covered his face with a sheet. The jailer pinched his foot and asked if he could feel it. Socrates said no. The coldness reached his waist. The room was silent, save for the muffled sobs of his friends. This was the man who survived the ice of Potidaea and the spears of the Spartans. Now he was being defeated by a small cup of weeds. Just as the poison reached his chest, Socrates did something unexpected. He uncovered his face. His eyes were bright, focused. He whispered his final words to Crito. "Crito, I owe a cock to Asclepius. Will you remember to pay the debt?" Crito promised it would be done and asked if there was anything else. There was no answer. A moment later, his body convulsed. The jailer uncovered him. His eyes were fixed. The gadfly of Athens was dead. But why those final words? Asclepius was the god of healing. In the ancient world, people offered a sacrifice to him when they recovered from a long, painful illness. By asking for this sacrifice at the moment of his death, Socrates was sending one final stinging message to the world. He believed that life on Earth, with all its shadows, ignorance, and sensory illusions, was the sickness. Death was the cure. He wasn't dying, he was finally waking up. The aftermath was a seismic shift in human history. Athens realized almost immediately that they had murdered their own conscience. They turned on the accusers. Miletus was sentenced to death. Anytus was exiled. The city went into mourning. But it was too late to kill the idea. Plato took the memory of his master and turned it into the foundation of Western civilization. Every university, every court of law, every scientific inquiry that demands why exists because an old man in a tathered robe refused to walk out of an open prison door. Socrates didn't write books because he wanted his philosophy to be lived, not read. He proved that the most powerful weapon in the world isn't a sword, it's a question. He showed us that a life unexamined is not worth living, and a truth worth knowing is a truth worth dying for. The cup of hemlock didn't end Socrates, it made him immortal. And today, 2,400 years later, he is still standing in the marketplace of our minds, asking us the one question we are still too afraid to answer. Who are you, and what do you truly know?